Resection of intravesical mesh after mid-urethral sling, transurethral and laparoscopic transvesical approach. This is a case report of a 45-year-old patient with a personal history of stress urinary incontinence treated with a mid-urethral sling in June 2000. We start this presentation with the initial cystoscopy that was performed immediately after the sling procedure. As you can see, this exam had no abnormalities, as the procedure occurred without further complications. Six months after the surgery, the patient had recurrent urinary infections and intravesical mesh was suspected and confirmed by cystoscopy. Therefore, the patient was scheduled for an elective excision of the mesh using a transurethral and laparoscopic transvesical approach. The instruments used during the procedure included a 5 mm laparoscopic portal, endoscopic scissors, and endoscopic graspers. For the urethral approach, a nephroscope was used for the operative cystoscopy since it had an operating channel that allowed to introduce the laparoscopic grasper. As we explored the bladder cavity through cystoscopy, the sling component was identified on the right side of the bladder with a 3 cm extension. The two arms of the mesh were visible. The other parts of the bladder were normal. We also confirmed patency of the ureter. A 5 mm laparoscopic suprapubic portal was introduced through the abdominal wall to the bladder. Here you can see how the transvesical abdominal port was introduced without complication, guided by cystoscopy. Laparoscopic scissors were introduced through the suprapubic portal, and endoscopic grasper was introduced in the bladder through the operating channel of the nephroscope. The interior arm of the sling component was exposed with middle traction provided by the grasper, and scissors were used to cut it as close as possible to the bladder mucosa. Traction was very important on this case because it guaranteed there were no remnants of mesh in the bladder wall. The same technique was used to cut the posterior arm of the mesh. The mesh was completely detached from the bladder mucosa, and it was removed from the bladder through the urethra by pulling the endoscopic device out. The mesh was easily removed and the size was confirmed. The laparoscopic portal was withdrawn with minimal leaking. This is the final cystoscopy, where you can see that there were no further complications such as bleeding. As of this moment, the patient has been symptom-free since the surgery. A stitch was applied on the abdominal incision.